During the long weekend in June, we decided to go to my dad's homeland, so to speak, to visit the ancestral home. The nest is in the Ivanovo region, in the Tchaikovsky district. Our village was small, about 30 houses even in its best years. And now it's just a bear's corner. If the zombie apocalypse starts, I'll hide out there, because neither the ambulance nor the police go to these places. They say there's no roads, so the zombies won't make it. But that's a joke. In fact, there is not a single permanent resident left in the village. Life boils only in the summer. In my childhood days, there was a rugged dirt road. A small state farm field was planted with wheat. Someone lived in every house, and in some of the number of residents increased threefold. One more peculiarity of our village was that everyone who lived there or came there was a relative. In general, wherever you look, you'll find yourself in the family. Our house was on the outskirts, the last one. Now the forest has almost approached the village, while before you had to walk through a small field, about 500 meters wide, past a strip of bushes, and only then the forest began. My sister and I spent every summer in the village. We had many children, cousins, third cousins, and the 10th water on the lake. The first incident happened when I was 3 years old. Naturally, I do not remember anything myself, but my sister, it turns out, remembers very well. So, I was 3 years old and my sister was 8, and there were a lot of people in the house, brothers and sisters, grandmothers with children and grandchildren. While the adults were tinkering in the vegetable garden and around the house, my sister and I were sent out for a walk. We were humble kids, we knew we couldn't go to the river, and we picked flowers on the lawn in front of the house. As it turned out, I loved all kinds of insects as a child, and I used to catch them with great pleasure. Some girls of the same age came to my sister's place to play, and they didn't notice how I disappeared. They didn't tell adults right away, they looked for me themselves, because I had nowhere to go, and I was afraid to go into the woods alone. When my sister realized that I was nowhere to be found, she ran to my parents. Panic broke out. They searched the house, ran to the river, and my dad and his uncles went around. Grandma was already going to go to a neighboring village to the police station. Suddenly my sister says, "Mama, here comes Masha." According to my sister's story, I was walking from the forest, or rather, from the bushes, walking alone, but my hand was raised, as if I were holding someone adult's hand. When I got closer, everyone heard me talking, but not just to myself, but as if answering questions. In my hand I was holding a few grasses with stringed strawberries in them. When I reached our vegetable garden, I turned around and waved, as if to say goodbye. When they asked me where I was, they heard that I was jumping for a grasshopper and ended up in the woods. I wanted to cry, but I saw my grandmother. She showed me the strawberries and how to string them on the grass. Then my grandmother took me by the hand and led me home. When asked what kind of grandmother she was, I firmly replied that our grandmother Dasha. Daria was my great-grandmother. She had died long before I was born. There was a wedding picture of great-grandfather and great-grandmother hanging in the house, but in my old age I didn't even see her picture. I don't remember the second incident myself, but I was told it several times by my relatives. It happened also in our village house. I was already 5 years old. In our village, we always celebrated Kazan, July 21, all relatives gathered, baked pies in huge quantities, sang songs. It was the same that summer. Relatives arrived, sat down at tables outside. Everyone was eating, drinking, talking. Suddenly I said to my grandmother, "Grandma, why don't you give Grandpa a matryoshka?" A matryoshka is a cheesecake. One of my aunts baked them very well. They all went silent. They asked me which grandfather, and I pointed to the porch and said, "Here, Grandpa Kostya." My grandmother's sister even cried. Her father, my great-grandfather Konstantin, used to call the matryoshka matryoshka. He too died before I was born. On the weekend we came to the village, my sister with her family and third cousin with her son. We were very happy to meet, we roasted some barbecue and had a good time. Closer to the night, the memories began. My second cousin Lara reminded me of two particularly interesting stories. I had never thought about whether they had a mystical origin, but after weighing everything, I decided that they did. Lara and I are the same age. She lived with her parents in India and Pakistan for a long time, so we met when we were 10. And we started getting weird when we were 12. At that age there was no brains at all, and my sense of self-preservation was lost somewhere. We were running around all over the place. We would go to a disco in a camp, 3 came from home, to the railway station to the store, 5 came. In general, we were for any pickup. Surprisingly, we had no adventures while running around. We were 13 years old, my own sister was 18. That summer our distant relative, who lived in the house next door to Lara, returned from some distant place. He was a quiet guy, drank and smoked a lot, didn't communicate with anyone. 2 more comrades arrived with him, all painted, with scary eyes, and we were all hooked. The relatives talked to them, the district policeman came, and they kind of got off our backs. Usually we went out in a big group, but that day for some reason it was just the 3 of us. It was hot, so we decided to go to the river. Our river, the Uktakma, was shallow and cold, so we couldn't really swim, but the 3 of us were sitting on the bank playing cards. Suddenly we saw these 2 comrades coming towards us. They came up and asked us how the water was. Then they saw our cards and offered to teach us how to play poker. My sister and I didn't even have time to open our mouths before Lurka blurted out, "Yes, we do." The men looked at each other, but began to explain. I honestly tell you, I was scared. I kept trying to get away, but leave Larry alone. Neither me nor my sister could not. I do not know at what point, but the jokes ended. The men offered to play a game of undress. My sister, being the oldest, began to refuse and said that it was time for us to go home. But one of them somehow told her very badly to sit down. At the time, a huge white dog appeared out of the bushes, looking like an alibi, only shaggier. Exactly appeared, because the bush is very sparse, and we did not see or hear her coming. She silently walked up and sat a meter away from us. The dog looked at the men with obvious aggression and then started growling. When one of them grabbed Lara's arm, the dog jumped up and barked. The men ran away. I don't know where the dog is gone, but it was here and it's gone. Unfortunately, the dog was not ours. Moreover, we did not have such a dog in our village, and in the neighborhood, too, we would have known such a pity. When we got home, we told our parents everything. There was a big scandal, the policeman was called, and the guys went to their place of residence. Our cousin brought a picture of his grandfather with a white dog that looked like an alibi. The picture was taken in the late 60s, grandfather died in 1974, his dog too. And he was buried near the river under a birch tree. Only later, the birch was cut down and bushes grew on the dog's grave. And one last story about human folly. Lara and I were 15 years old. I was going to technical school that summer and had taken my last exam. There was plenty of time before the results were announced, so I drove to my favorite village. From the train station to our village is about 5 kilometers, but walking along the forest road is just a fairy tale. The road goes through the woods only halfway, then begins paving stone. There were cars and shuttle buses. And about a mile in, the road goes on, and a not so wide dirt road leads to us. Lara knew I was coming, so she went to meet me. My bag was pretty heavy, we often stopped to rest. The road was empty, not many people went to our village. Suddenly, a military vehicle with a canvas top came towards us from around the corner. We were very surprised. The nearest military unit was in Tikovo, no military facilities nearby. Nevertheless, the car was going. When the car came up to us, it stopped and there were only 2 soldiers. The man sitting next to the driver got out of the car and said to us, "Girls, where are you going?" We called the village. I told him, "That's where you're coming from." Then he said that they were looking for a hospital, if there was one nearby. And there was a mental hospital nearby, but they mostly treated alcoholics there. So he asks us to show him where the hospital is. We explain to him that it's easy to get there, but he asks us to show him anyway, and promises to take him straight home. He says that it takes 15 minutes to get there, and that the boys are cute, so let's get acquainted. I refuse. The soldier gets angry. Lerka insists. And suddenly I see my dad walking down the road. Apparently he didn't wait and went to meet me. And I said, "I'm going to give my bag to my father and then we'll go and see him." The soldier looked back and jumped into the car with a frantic look, and they started off so fast that we flew away. I looked and Daddy was gone. Lenka was rambling all the way that I had made it all up, that Dad wasn't coming, and because of me we hadn't met the guys. When I got to the village, Dad was asleep. Then he told me that he was chopping wood, waiting for me, and suddenly he was so sleepy that he couldn't remember how he got home. And he said that he had a dream. Lara and I were getting into a car with a soldier, and then we were thrown off a bridge alive, and he was running along the road and wanted to find the bridge. I was afraid to tell him about the meeting with the soldiers. Dad had a bad headache and weakness all day. I told Lara everything. She was the one who reminded me of the story. A couple of days later, operatives and military police came to the village. It turned out that 2 soldiers had deserted from a military unit while repairing the railroad tracks. They wounded a lieutenant, stole a gun and stole a car. All this happened 50 kilometers from our place. I don't know how they got here. They broke into the hospital and stole some medicines. 2 nurses were injured. Everyone was warned to be careful. I, out of fright, told them about our meeting and even remembered the license plate numbers, which confirmed that they were deserters. Naturally, we were scolded, to put it mildly, but we were frightened ourselves. We ran from me to Lerka, and only walked around in the daytime. Then they found them. My sister and I continued to make weird stuff, but with caution. Maybe there is nothing mystical in these cases, but I really want to believe that there is.